Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
On this week's program, the ongoing debate over dedicated spending for highways, roads, bridges, and transit continues at the state capitol. We talk with key transportation policymakers from both the House and the Senate. Stay tuned for this and more on this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Lurkey. The Senate Republicans' transportation plan would infuse $1.3 billion in road and bridge infrastructure in the next 2 years and calls for $3.6 billion in funding over 10 years without raising the gas tax. Chair of the Transportation Committee, Senator Scott Newman, now joins me in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You are focusing on road and bridge infrastructure in your plan. How would you currently grade Minnesota's road and bridge system, and what would this bill do to improve it?
In terms of bridges, I would be frankly more concerned about the condition of our bridges in the state of Minnesota, and I'm talking statewide, than I would the roads. Overall, our roads are pretty good, although in the metropolitan area very congested. What I'm really thinking more about is the future in terms of the funding that's going to be needed to not only maintain our current roads and bridges, but to actually improve them or expand them.
The legislative auditor issued a report last year that was critical of MnDOT's project selection process and how they choose which projects are going to be funded. Your plan calls for some common sense changes in that selection process. What are those changes? How would that work?
Well, first of all, the legislative auditor's report that you are referring to, for instance, made a statement that MnDOT has failed to follow the criteria laid out by the legislature for corridors of commerce, and in fact has inserted their own criteria, irrespective of what the legislature has said. I interpret that to mean that MnDOT is not following current law, and I have been very critical of MnDOT from the standpoint of their transparency and their selection process. What I've tried to put into this particular bill is to reinforce what the criteria is and mandate again that MnDOT not only follow the selection process but make it more transparent so that our constituents and our folks in Minnesota can be assured that they in fact have some input as to what roads and bridges and infrastructure MnDOT is going to use in their selection process.
So moving forward with this new money, are the projects already slated for which ones are going to be done next, or will this bill would change which projects are going to go forward?
That's the difficult question, because we don't know necessarily what projects are slated to go forward next. And that is, for instance, why I have pushed MnDOT as hard as I have to give us more transparency and give us an idea as to how it is that you are selecting the roads. The best example I can give you is Highway 12 going west out of the metropolitan area. That is, in fact, a very, very dangerous road. And I've driven it during rush hour, and it's backed up all the way west to Delano, which is a farm community west of the metro. And yet MnDOT has been very resistant to take the necessary steps to repair that road. And that's what the real controversy is about. So what I am hoping is that MnDOT will come forward with a selection process that's more transparent, that will tell folks in the legislature and the citizens of the state of Minnesota what roads and bridges are on to be fixed or repaired or improved, and why. And also answer the question, how come these other roads that we are asking for are not being fixed?
Let's move to comments by Governor Dayton and the Democrats. They've been critical of this plan, pointing out that the funding mechanism, which in part moves $400 million in auto-related sales from the general fund to a dedicated transportation fund, they argue that this puts existing money in competition with programs for education and health care. How do you respond to that criticism?
My response is number one, I think the people in the state of Minnesota have been clamoring for some kind of dedicated funding. And what I've tried to do with this bill is statutorily rededicate existing sales tax so that it goes into the trunk highway fund and is spent on roads and bridges. That's what I'm trying to do. And I'm using statutorily dedicated funds because I do not have available to me a constitutional mandate to do that. To take the money out of the general fund, I do understand their criticism and their concern, but I tend to look at the state government budget from an overall standpoint, not the little silos, silos being transportation or HHS or education. I look at the whole budget. We've got about 5.5 million people in this state, and if you count up the state budget, the federal money that we get, the money that is paid at the local level, all of the fees that we pay as citizens, number one, I think we're already paying at least half of our income to the government in some form or fashion. And in total, we are currently spending about $80 billion a biennium. And so I begin to wonder how many times can you go back to the well and extract money out of our citizens to pay for more and more programs. I'm candidly really nervous about the loss of revenue from the federal government on HHS, for instance. So I'm looking at it from a more global standpoint. I'm not looking at it from just the standpoint of money for transportation. I have to get money for transportation from someplace. And I think it's appropriate to get some of that money out of this enormous sum of money that the government has available to it right now.
One of the biggest sticking points is the disagreement between transit and transportation. In fact, your plan would eliminate the state's responsibility for a portion of operating costs for future light rail projects. How should the state handle the anticipated growth in the metro area, the current level of congestion, and the needs of those who rely on transit to get around? How do we balance that?
Two different questions have just been posed. The first one involves light rail. I personally and many of my colleagues strenuously oppose funding light rail. And we oppose it just as strenuously as some folks on the other side of the aisle are in support of it. My feeling is that at $100 million a mile to construct light rail and its inflexibility on delivering the services that folks, particularly in the metro, need, I think it's a very inefficient way to spend our money. So from that standpoint, I do support the notion of repealing the current statute that says the state of Minnesota is on the hook for paying for 50% of the future operating costs of light rail that have not yet been built. And I want your listeners and your viewers to understand that the state of Minnesota currently is not involved in the decision making of building those light rails. We simply are on the hook for paying for 50% of the operating cost. Now, to shift to your other question, transit. I very much support the notion of transit, both in greater Minnesota and in the metropolitan area. It's absolutely needed. But the question becomes, what are we going to use? And that's, I think, the conversation that I'm going to try to resolve next year. This year, roads and bridges.
Senator Newman, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
On Wednesday, Muslim Minnesotans gathered in the state capitol rotunda to celebrate the 13th annual Muslim Day at the Capitol. Attendees heard speeches by a number of lawmakers, government officials, and Muslim community leaders.
The time is now for all people who love fairness and justice, regardless of their faith or affiliation, to come together and rise above this ideology of hatred and discrimination.
You know, we're living in an extremely difficult time in America, a time when extremists feel safe to create extreme situations that endanger others. When civil discourse is discarded for uncivil polemics, or worse, and when modern mass media transmits every mad deed immediately to the rest of the world. That's why it's important that we are gathered here today at our state's capital.
Today, I have the honor and the privilege of being a member of the House of Representatives. as a Muslim, as an immigrant, as a refugee, when I decided to run, that there will be a lot of hardships. There will be a lot of hurdles to overcome. There will be a lot of scrutiny. What I did not expect and what I did not know would happen is that we would have a president who would be part of that scrutiny, who would be part of that hateful rhetoric, who would be part of that divisive narrative. And so today I feel empowered in knowing that all of you are standing up with me.
My fellow Americans, as you are, let us never forget that it is an idea that has made America, and always remember, Americans are not born, they are made. Just like this great land in which we live is made in the hearts of every free American.
I want to talk about Islamophobia because it seems like it's everywhere these days, and it seems like it's a fact of life. It is always rooted in ignorance, but it is sometimes rooted in hatred. Whatever its roots, let's all be clear here today. Islamophobia has no place in Minnesota.
In comparison to the Senate transportation bill, the House transportation bill would provide $2 billion over the next biennium and $6 billion over the next 10 years. Joining me in the studio to discuss the House bill is the chair of the House Transportation Finance Committee, Representative Paul Torkelson. Welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Shannon.
What are the primary objectives of the House Republican Transportation Plan, and who will benefit most?
Well, there's been quite a bit of discussion in the past couple of bienniums about the need for transportation funding. Of course, we didn't get a lot done last biennium, but this idea about the quantity of the need has been pretty thoroughly discussed, and this number of $6 billion over 10 years has kind of been a benchmark, and we decided as we assembled our bill that we would try to meet that benchmark in the best way we could, and that's kind of how we got to that $6 billion over 10. We thought we should heavily load it in the front end, partly because of that failure last year to get a substantial transportation bill passed. We thought it was appropriate to load it a little more heavily in the front end of that 10-year period to kind of make up for some of that deficit in the last biennium.
I understand that there's $300 million on corridors of commerce, that small cities and local bridge programs are beneficiaries in your plan. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, you touched on three important items. The Corridors of Commerce, of course, is a quite popular program that identifies these inter-regional corridors in the state, both within the metro area and in greater Minnesota. Has funded a number of projects over the years that it's been in place. It's kind of a separate priority system from the normal priority system, and it's actually worked quite well. And so we've put a substantial amount of money up front into that program because we believe the need is there to meet those objectives. The other two programs you talked about, bringing the local bridge program into the bill, I think is appropriate because the biggest complaint I get from county engineers is that they can't plan. They don't know if they're going to have money coming in any given year, yet we have this list of bridges, it's about this long, that are ready to go. Their plans are in place, everything is ready, they just need the money, the portion of the state money to be in place. So by putting this into the regular bill, they're going to see that that money is there every year, and then going on into the future, it's about $12.5 million a year. And I think you also mentioned the small cities.
Yeah.
That was a popular item in last biennium's transportation bill that brought $12.5 million to our smallest cities, those under 5,000, to help them with their local streets. We've expanded on that by putting it in both years of the upcoming biennium at $12.5 million each year, just to give them a little help with the work they need to do. They were kind of on the short end because other cities over 5,000 have always gotten some money.
Are there going to be any specific earmarks for projects in this plan?
Not at this point. There are no earmarks in our transportation bill at this point. That, of course, was a hot topic last year as we neared the end of session with the earmarks that were in the bonding bill. And We'll see. I don't know how that'll be handled. It's my hope that we could get to the point where we have an understanding with the department about which projects the legislature thinks are important. There's been many instances where we haven't had an official earmark, but there's been an understanding that a certain project was going to be funded with, for instance, with trunk highway bonds. I go back to the Highway 53 bridge up near Virginia, where we voted for the authorization of $144 million worth of trunk highway bonds. They weren't, quote, earmarked in the bill, but everyone knew that that money was going to that project. So there's understanding between the legislature and the department. I'd like to do that same sort of work as we look at other projects that are important to legislators.
Now, the House bill is significantly larger than the Senate bill, $6 billion over 10 years versus $3.6 billion, and $2 billion up front versus $1.3 for the first biennium. Why is yours bigger?
Well, I think I touched on that earlier about this understanding that that is kind of what the identified need is, and that's really, what our objective was to meet that understood need.
So, and also with asking for more money, the plan relies on bonding. Although the state has a budget surplus, is this good fiscal policy?
Well, as long as it's done in a reasonable fashion. We don't want to become over-reliant on bonding. Some states borrow all the money they use for transportation construction projects. We're not at that point. We have guidelines within the department that identify this 20% threshold, so they can't issue, or the guidance says they won't issue more trunk highway bonds than is necessary to stay below that 20% threshold. As far as GO bonding, it's something we've done virtually every cycle. Is some GO bonds have gone to construction projects. So I think it's reasonable. We're not too far out of whack, and we're very close to what the governor is recommending as far as bonding in his transportation proposal.
Right, though the governor has a different way to pay for it than you do.
Certainly.
Okay. One more question. Chair of the Met Council, Adam Dunnick, said at a press conference earlier this week that the House proposal would result in a 40% cut to Metro Transit services, meaning fewer transit routes. What do you say to people who rely on transit to get around?
Well, I've said from the beginning I want to get a substantial transportation bill on the governor's desk, and that I did not intend to ignore transit. But there's a lot of complications around transit funding right now. The federal government is thinking about not funding, perhaps not funding the Southwest Light Rail project. CTIB, the County Transportation Improvement Board, is thinking about breaking up, which could dramatically change the way transit especially is funded in the metro area. And we have some lawsuits going on also. So until these things start to sort themselves out, it's really hard for us to decide just what the state's position should be on transit. I think there'll be some changes as we move forward through the process.
So it's a wait and see.
That's my position, yes.
Representative Torkelson, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. I love this new Senate studio, first time in here, and you got great facilities.
We hope to have you back then.
I will look forward to it.
Advocates for mass transit called a press conference at the state capitol this week to highlight the necessity of adequate funding. Under the House Transportation Plan, funding for transit services would be cut by $122 million for the next biennium.
The budget would have significant impacts on Metro Mobility. That's something that we are already facing, a $24 million shortfall, that if we do not get the funds to fund Metro Mobility and other paratransit services we need to provide for the region. One, much of the region is required to have a federal mandate as well as a state imposed mandate for us to provide that service. And then by taking those funds away, will make it that much harder for the council and the region and the people of the region to have those services.
I myself have disabilities. In 2006, I had a seizure while I was driving, totaled my car, lost my job, became disabled, and got diagnosed with epilepsy. I was living in the suburbs and couldn't adequately get to all of the places I needed and wanted to go every day. So I moved to the city and started taking the city bus. I lived without a car for a decade, and I got everywhere I needed to go every single day using the bus.
In addition to representing our nearly 1,500 members throughout the metro area, the Chamber is a downtown employer. And like many of our members, upwards of 50% of our employee population relies on transit to get to work every day. The proposed bill puts our economic competitiveness at risk and is going to harm hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses who rely on transit to get their employees to work on time and to bring customers to their businesses.
The two light rail lines are providing 27% of all the rides, just two lines. And then we've got the bus system, the workhorse that gets people where they need to go. And most of these rides are about getting to work or getting to school. So this isn't about a frill, something over on the side. It's an integral part of the transportation system, and we are not going to be able to build enough roads in this region to deal with what this economy needs. The opponents here are trying to walk away from that investment. They think they can tax cut their way to economic prosperity. It's not going to happen. The fundamental building block is infrastructure for transportation, and we need to make that investment.
At a recent press conference, my next guest called the Senate Republican transportation plan wholly inadequate. Joining me in the studio to further clarify his position on the plan is the ranking minority member of the Transportation Committee, Senator Scott Dibble. Welcome.
Thanks, Shannon.
Republicans argue that there's no reason to raise taxes to fund transportation at a time of surplus and that Minnesotans want tax cuts rather than tax increases. How do you respond?
Well, I'd just invite people to take a look at the Republican proposal. It is wholly inadequate. The resources that they use don't even get us to half of what's needed just to maintain our current system, whether we're talking about state roads or local roads. And they do absolutely nothing for transit, which in effect will force a 20% cut in our transit service in the metropolitan area, just in local bus service. So when we raise a little bit of money and put it into transportation, it has a return on the dollar, and we have a larger benefit to more prosperous lives and a better economy, more competitive state. So it's not like we're just putting money in, we're getting money out. If we fail to put investments, we pay in other ways. Decreased economic results, more expensive road fixes that'll have to occur in the future, people forced to buy a car who otherwise wouldn't necessarily need a car, and sprawl development that forces all kinds of new infrastructure that's very, very expensive as well.
What would it take for both urban and rural voters to feel that their needs are being met without being taxed too greatly? In a perfect world, how would transportation be funded?
Well, I think you just have a balance of sources and a balance of modes to make sure that we're building the kind of transportation that suits the needs to local conditions. We work closely with folks around the state and identify what those needs are, whether an interregional corridor needs to be, have a lane or two added to it, whether we need local bus service to serve senior citizens and students who are trying to get to school and work and other needs that they have throughout the day, or working, doing as other metropolitan areas do around the entire country, add a little bit to our sales tax so we have transit, which is a far more efficient form of transportation that doesn't then necessitate very expensive roads in the metro, saving everyone resources across the entire state.
The Senate Republican website I'm quoting, says, in the last biennium, taxpayers from all corners of the state subsidized 2 light rail lines in the Twin Cities Metro to the tune of $49 million, regardless of their proximity to it or the ability to use it. So this argument that people in greater Minnesota don't want to pay for light rail is being used. Why should a taxpayer in Laverne contribute to metro area transit?
Well, let me first start with the premise that we're all one state and we're all invested in our success and making sure that we have prosperous communities in every part of the state. The metropolitan area generates about 2/3 of the gross domestic product, and the taxes that are generated in the metropolitan area actually go out to Laverne and places like that to pay for those roads. I will likely never drive on a stretch of county highway or state highway up in the far northwestern corner of the state. I'm happy to pay for the improvements to that community with my tax dollars because I know it's good for the folks who live up there and it's good for the overall state. Likewise, if we're paying for transit in the metropolitan area, as I mentioned earlier, that's a far more efficient form of transportation. We have about 800,000 folks who are going to come to the state over the next 10 or 15 years. There's no way we're going to be able to build enough roadway infrastructure, which is far more expensive and gets you far less transportation, to handle that kind of pressure. And if we were to do that, then all the roadway resources would be used in the metropolitan area. I think it's in everyone's interest for this state level of congestion that occurs in various places. We all participate together.
Well, speaking of the expense, Senator Newman pointed out that light rail costs $100 million per mile and described it as an inefficient way of spending money. Light rail is also fixed in one area, so there's inflexibility in terms of changing directions. Why do you think that light rail is an important part of overall transit?
Well, I'd say you go back and analyze the cost-benefit ratio. And To be sure, the capital expense for light rail is high, but the benefit is that you have a lot of development that occurs along that corridor that generates more than what you put in terms of taxes, in terms of jobs, in terms of economic growth in the metropolitan area that would not occur otherwise. Or if it were to occur, it would occur in very disparate ways that causes the need for very expensive infill infrastructure. It's a far more expensive way for us to do our land use. Plus we attract all kinds of new businesses, new employees to the metropolitan area. And the very fact that it is fixed is a big reason for the higher benefit that you receive for the cost. Furthermore, the ongoing operations of a fixed guideway rail system is actually overall less expensive on an annual basis because you have fleets that last a whole lot longer. If you need to add capacity, you're not adding additional employee dollars, additional energy dollars. You can add capacity for a long, long time without adding additional vehicles and additional employees and that sort of thing.
Last year, the Office of the Legislative Auditor released a report on MnDOT's project selection process and found a lack of transparency. The Republican plan would require that the Commissioner of Transportation impartially score future projects and publish the results. Do you agree with this as a way to bring more transparency?
I think, more transparency, more consultation, and more objectivity. Kind of balancing those seem like they're competing ideas, but they're actually, if you put those in balance, then you have more trust for the project selection process, whether it's corridors of commerce or just the regular state road construction. But I find it a little bit ironic that Republicans are advocating this while they're also developing long lists of earmarked projects that may or may not be ready, that leapfrog other projects that aren't fully ready, not putting enough money in for these projects. Very, very untransparent. These lists were hatched in a corner office with no scrutiny or oversight. They seem to be political in nature. I would just ask for consistency from the majority party when they're talking about transparency and objectivity in the project selection process.
And one last question. There's a proposal in both the House and Senate plans that would impose a fee on electric cars. Electric car owners argue that because the cost of their cars is so much higher, they already pay high sales tax and registration fees. What's your view on that aspect of raising money?
Right, so the argument is that they don't pay gas taxes, so they don't pay for roads, but the truth is they pay more than they would otherwise pay for gas tax in the higher motor vehicle sales tax and the higher registration fees to offset the gas tax that they're not paying for in excess of 10 years. So it's really not an argument that really adds up.
So it doesn't work for you?
No, and furthermore, we have a lot of external benefits to electric cars in terms of the environment and in our energy profile and our carbon emissions.
Senator Duvall, I want to thank you for your time today.
Great, thank you, Shannon.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Lurkey, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.